We like to start off with going back a little bit and understanding, where you come from. You earlier in the networking part, you were speaking German, but also it seems like you're not natively Swiss. How does that work? Tell us about where do you come from? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, where did I grow up? So I'm half American, half Swiss, but I pretty much lived most of my life in Switzerland. My parents met in New York, a Swiss guy and a California gal, and I was born in California, but we moved to Switzerland when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And since then, we've been living out. I grew up in eastern Switzerland, in Thurgau. And then after being also in eastern Switzerland for my business studies, now I've moved to Zurich and been a Zurich resident for the past 10 years. So I'm pretty Zurich. We can also do it in Schweizerdeutsch. But I think that's also a bit this entrepreneurial side for sure comes from a very open American family where everybody is running their own business. So that's why I think also when talking about entrepreneurship, I'm not your classical Swiss entrepreneur, and that's where I come from, and that's a bit the background and the heritage from a cultural standpoint that I bring in my little backpack with me.
What did you do any studies here in Switzerland?
Can you say it one more time?
Did you do any of your studies here in Switzerland?
I studied in the University of St. Gallen. I was studying business, and it kind of there's no right or wrong thing to study when you start at being an entrepreneur, because normally there's people that even don't. I have a few friends that even broke off their studies, but I think I was just a generalist. So I studied there, and I majored in the end in business innovation. What was a newer master that they defined on doing business model design. So maybe some of you guys know, but there's a lot of business model research coming out of Switzerland from the EPFL. They have, Osterwalder that was pushing the business canvas. And then I was working during my master's studies with the pendant in St. Gallen, which is Gassmann, with also his own canvas. Yeah, so that's kind of where I come from, an academic perspective, into also these entrepreneurial canvases. So you can ask me anything about these canvases, I should remember and still know it. So we were doing research on business model design back then in St. Gallen, and that's what I majored then in.
Okay. And when you were younger as a child, did you have some influence, like were your parents or any of your relatives entrepreneurial? Did you already feel at that time sort of the entrepreneurial bug, or is that something that came later on?
Well, it's a mix. My parents both. My father is, being Swiss. He doesn't come from an entrepreneurial family at all. My mom, yes. Her dad, my grandfather, built basically recycled wax. So back in the days, he started recycling industrial wax in California, and that was his business. So yes, she comes from an entrepreneurial side. And my mom also, when she moved to Switzerland, maybe some people who are expats here listening know it, she used to have a business of doing custom tailor work. So she did suits for like basketball players or just oversized people in every way, but a lot of sports people. But coming to Switzerland, she had to give up that business because it was one woman show. And then she started her own English studio, basically teaching the whole little village in Switzerland that we live in. So I would say that side is more entrepreneurial, but I think it's kind of the interesting part also with my dad. He always says, I'm a Steh-auf-Männchen. There's this German word, is that he's kind of somebody, he always told me, if you get smacked down and you have to stand up again and continue on. Yeah. And I think all this tenacity side also came very strongly from somebody who himself was not an entrepreneur, but more of a life artist and a resilient person, that I think also kind of pushed that a bit and said, I wasn't a straight A student. It wasn't for me a fly through university. So I think I had this ability to always stand up again after something failed or something didn't work out, to continue. So yes, there's an entrepreneurial background, but not just that. I think it was a mix that my parents kind of brought along into it.
have when you were younger in your teenage years, anything related to business development or anything related to starting your own projects? And how did that come about?
Well, I think I was always a very curious, and still am a very curious person who likes to kind of get things done and address stuff that I see that I think is not, going the right way. I think one of my earlier experiences was we had the Balkan crisis in Switzerland. So when the Balkan wars were happening, we had a lot of younger kids joining our classes. I mean, I at the time was 14, 15, 16, joining our classes, not your classical refugees, but really talking about what was going on in the Balkan area. So that kind of made me very sensitive towards what it means to be a refugee, what it means to be maybe a refugee also for economical reasons, or is it also for war reasons? Long story short, a few of my friends feeling similarly, we asked around in Eastern Switzerland if we could do something social and if we could help a few organizations. So we start helping a few NGO organizations, just volunteering, doing stuff like different stuff. And long story short, out of that kind of evolved that we contacted also the Red Cross, and they said, we don't have a youth organization. So we have younger people asking to help, but we don't have projects that they can join. Would you like to build this up? So we were a group of 4 friends and we founded the Red Cross for Eastern Switzerland. And that today evolved to be a 60-person or 60 youth, and the youth fluctuates. I mean, there's somewhere from 12 to 20 in that youth group, but about 60 people pushing along 5 different projects, helping elderly, helping refugees, helping also people get jobs that maybe don't speak German that well, etc. And this was one of my earliest, I think, projects that really came into full swing and scope. And I am very happy to still do this. And I've had so many things that didn't work out that I'm also very happy to share. But it's always been, for me, something that I just like to address it, and I'm curious, and I just see where things lead. I'm normally the person who takes up the phone, like when I have a question, and I talk to different people and see if I can have a contribution and understand what is going on. And out of that, projects and some businesses even have evolved.
And the current business that you have right now, is this your first business and your first startup, or did you have any other attempts before that?
It's kind of like, so Sandborn as a company for me is my chameleon. It's under which I have worked now for years on different businesses. There has been businesses before that I've participated and worked in, not as a shareholder. There's a few, namely startups that I can name drop. There's if you look at the top 100 Swiss startups, the one that Wingtra was one of my first startups that I worked with on helping them get grant funding. But this involvement was always, I'm a real facilitator nature, so I'm always somebody that would jump in at a certain point. And this happened before I founded my company. This happened only several years later.
And is this something in founding your company? So maybe what's the elevator pitch, or what you said it's like an umbrella entity for all these different projects, but did it evolve over time, or was it you had an idea, I want to found this company and I want to do that? As many entrepreneurs, usually they're trying to do a specific thing, whereas it seems like you're involved in many different things under your brand, under your company. So was there a starting point, or did it evolve into that?
No, there was a clear starting point for it. I think it's evolved into which detail I'm acting now over the years. The starting point was the following. So I worked for 2 years for Startup.ch. It's a company foundation platform that just specializes with doing, I call it 0815, so very classic GmbH and AG foundations, right? But they still, or I hope still up to date, do about 2,000 companies a year. And you have a lot of different questions that came in at the time. And I was responsible for the business consulting arm for just startup questions, or also people that had a business that they wanted to sell. And I was also responsible for running the academy. And back then my boss resigned, and I then was like, oh, maybe it's the time to resign as well. And then that's with my resignation came the clear insight that I have enjoyed doing work in consulting. I have enjoyed running an academy, but I've also, another key learning was, if I help, the one thing I can do is I can help people build their businesses. But if I really take equity and risks, I like it to be my own business. And that is a clear company builder method, right? So I founded the company, Sandborn, under the idea that I would do exactly that. So I would remain doing consulting work because that would bring me money, because I also didn't have now a lot of savings that I can lead back on. I would remain running academy work because I really enjoy educational services. And I will take, and the third pillar of the business is building business at the own power of the business that I then own to 100% internally. And that's, with that basic idea, I started early on. I think with the positioning on what kind of businesses I'm building today and with what kind of education I'm working, I got more specific over time.
Okay. Has there been any really crazy startup ideas that you thought, this is crazy, but you tried it, or you said, no, this is too crazy, this is not going to work?
I think for me, I'm a real people person. So I've heard a lot of crazy ideas, and normally I don't judge the idea. That's because I have seen ideas that I would have never thought work out. I think there's been some very wacky ideas that I didn't join because I didn't believe in them. I do then say, oh man, I could work, but not my cup of tea. I'm not going to join. I don't know. I think it's like, let me think about an idea where I was like, no, this is not for me. I think a lot what happened in the blockchain space, for anybody doing blockchain listening, bear with me, it can work. But for me, it was just so gnarly. I was like listening to these ideas. I was like, sounds very far-fetched. And there was a few at the time that I was like, does that really work? And I did help one. And so we had like a science publishing startup that wanted to put the whole science publishing onto the blockchain. And I was just like, does that make sense, right? I went along for the ride. It ended up, at the moment, it's in a very tricky situation. But it's most of the times the people that I think are the key. If you guys have grit and are into it and good people, you can start with mediocre ideas and turn it into gold. But if the people are the wrong ones, you can have a golden idea and then it cannot work out. Right. So there's for sure been some wacko ideas, but there's sometimes also some very simple ideas that I thought, I didn't even see them, to be honest. Even now, for me, a very simple idea has monetized for me well. And I didn't see it, nor was I particularly interested in it. Just kind of came into my lap, and I was like, nobody's doing that, or nobody's doing it in a good way. And then I stuck with it. That's that we do 3D models. So we do 3D modularizations for furniture, what is absolutely not a high-tech startup. Yeah. But it's profitable and it's a good, well-running business, especially now during Corona, where also the whole real estate market has to do more and more visualization.
Yeah. What would be, I guess, some top advice you'd give to entrepreneurs here, specifically here in Switzerland, who are looking to start or are in the early stage of their startup?
What they should look for. I mean, I think in Switzerland, what I always say, you have to have a lot of tenacity because people are in their golden cages and it takes a lot. That's why I love what you guys are doing here. You have to surround yourself by people that are on the same journey, because for me, it was very hard to be an entrepreneur, especially the past few years and still today. I call it, I sail close to the wind. So there's times when I really have to buckle up financially and say, okay, this can really go south or it can work out for me. But I think that has been hard for me in Switzerland because a lot of my colleagues and friends, they earn a lot of money and nobody wants to do a startup, or then they have the expectation that they go enter the startup life and they think that they can continue as it was before. And I was like, no, you have to really know what your living costs are. You have to like get out of that golden cage. So I think that's it's not, I know despite everybody saying that Zurich and Switzerland is great on the innovation, when it comes to innovation execution and actually running the marathon, it's a tough surrounding to be in. It's high priced, expensive. So my tip is always run it through your head on how long you want to take to build the startup. Have enough money aside for you to run on whatever you feel comfortable with, maybe a half a year. And then comes my next clue is just getting investors is not that easy. So I am a big fan for myself of building profitable businesses first. And once you see that you can actually flip and earn some money with it, then you can think about scaling it together maybe with investors. But you first have to understand, can you make it profitable or not? And hitting profitability fast, then again, kind of decreases your stress levels. Switzerland, from a regulation level, from founding the startups, from having infrastructure that is startup friendly is great. I think the ecosystem is getting better and better. And there's a lot of networks there to support and help it. That is something I always notice, like setting up a company or finding the right partners to partner with. You can think about that. If you're trying to scale up, I think like from a scalability standpoint, there will be a trade-off that you maybe have to open a different hub or that you cannot have your whole labor force here in Switzerland. But because Swiss like high quality, you're always going to be performing on high quality standards. So you're most of the time more effective than other markets. So that's been kind of my Swiss startup space experience so far.
Okay. Just as a reminder, if someone has a question, feel free to drop it into the chat and we'll bring it into the conversation as well. I guess you've talked to a lot of both entrepreneurs as well as corporates who are looking to do entrepreneurial development. What is the big difference you see between corporate innovation and entrepreneurship versus entrepreneurial people who are trying to start their own business?
I think that the main one, and it's a pretty obvious one, is agility. So as individuals, entrepreneurs, you're able to act on it without going through a lot of decision boards, right? So, I think you kill ideas in a mind game very early, right? When you're just going back and saying, oh, that stat, this stat, blah, blah, blah. And this happens too fast with the corporate. So one doesn't give the ideas the space and chance and the speed that they need, like the individual people or you guys are able to do. That's the main difference I see. On the other hand, and now this is from an impact level, if a corporate innovation puts a lot of thought, and you can also take what I just put negatively into the positive, they put a lot of thought into things, and if it works out, the impact is at a larger scale. If it works out, right? And so it's a different way of entrepreneurship. I think what corporates, if there's some people in here listening who are innovation managers, right? As an innovation manager of a corporate and also the people I work with, we all know we're running against a wall with the corporates. It's just a question how fast and when you're going to hit. And during the time, you kind of want to leave a bit of a positive impact and say, okay, we actually helped the culture. We made them a bit better. And that has to be like, I say, what makes you happy. While with a startup, you can actually just execute a bit faster on things, but the struggle for scaling up is going to be a longer and more tedious one as well. Yeah.
Okay. And you do a lot of coaching and workshops and things like that for entrepreneurs. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see, whether practical or mindset, are there a few topics that are recurring almost every time?
Well, there's not. I think everybody has to make their own mistakes, right? What is, like, is there a common mistake, or is there a thing? I think there's one mistake that I see, especially in Switzerland, is that people don't move. Like, really, if you have an idea, just try it. Like, don't be so afraid. There's so little that can go wrong. It's actually mind game. That's the biggest mistake. I see people that are, especially now during Corona, where we have depression rates going up and stuff, people are getting very frustrated. This is the perfect opportunity to just do something and try it. Because I see a lot of people, maybe it's also, David, because I work a lot with women in the past times, but there's a lot of self-doubt, unnecessary self-doubt, where I'm like, who am I to say that you can do it, right? All the people that tell you can't do it or that your idea is shit, they're not even going to try it. And I think that is the biggest mistake, is, I think, if you look back on your life and saying, why did I not at least try it, right? If you now go more into the systematic problems that you'll see with building a business, over engineering for sure. Like, there's this lovely thing I like to explain, in that prototyping is, you can prototype for years, okay? So what you have to understand is how you validate your business idea before building something, okay? And I know this has been taught a lot, but there's this good book from Savoia talking about prototyping, like, make a pretendotype. Like, if you're figuring out to write a book, make a book cover, design it, print it out, put it into Oral Fürstly and the selection, and see how many people anchor and grab it. And when they really grab the book, then give them, I don't know, a Lindt chocolate and say, thank you, sorry, I was just testing if actually somebody would buy my book with that title, before that you write it, right? I catch myself doing this mistake very often. I very often already start engineering and putting too much effort into something where I don't know if it's the right it, okay? And there you kind of have to dissect this word prototyping a bit and understand exactly that first you're looking into, is it the right it? Is it the right idea? Is somebody going to actually buy it? Okay, and not go into too much of the product design. That comes later on. Then, I mean, there's also scale-up problems. I see a lot of people that are struggling with, okay, I'm selling products, but I'm a one-woman, one-man show, and how do I now get this next step? And that's to do with growth, right? Where is this growth engine? And that you rightfully identify it and then get your operations set up is the other. It's not really a mistake, but it's where then people struggle to reach that next level from, okay, I'm actually selling a product and people are wanting it, and how can I now go big, right? And here I think there's people in Switzerland that know how to help you, and if you're at that point, I think you have to kind of clue yourself in. But one key learning is you have to understand your growth engine. And I think people get spread out with so many different marketing and sales techniques, and they're just one person, and they drown themselves in it because they don't have enough time to management. That's why I always like to say, you guys have to be so different. You don't have to do what everybody else did before, because then you're not going to stand out. So figure out one thing, one way that you're going to grow your business, and then milk it, right? And what I also see that they do in this growth phase is they try to go into other user group too early. Like, if your user group is Zurich-based women, still maybe a bit too broad, but you have to own it. You have to own that group. You don't move until you own it. People try to have several products for several target groups way too early. You have to say, nail, laser sharp focus, and then once you own these client groups, only then you start scaling up and diversifying. So too early diversification, maybe.
Yeah, just to build on what you were talking about earlier regarding prototyping and figuring out what your core business is. I always tell people, because also in Switzerland there's a big concern about sharing your idea. but you can never, unless you have a specific IP or something that's really technical. But normally, as they say, ideas are cheap. It's the execution that matters. And so the more people you tell, the more people you talk to about it, the sooner you'll get to, as you said, the it, and then you can go into building it.
Yeah, I think that's and it's important to kind of put actions to your words. I think is a hard thing, especially in Switzerland where you have this loss of face or that it doesn't work out. But I think there's communities here that accept it, and then you can talk about it with it.
You mentioned that you work often with female founders. It's something also at Startup Grind. We try to promote diversity and female entrepreneurship and spotlight that more and more often. Is there something that you've seen over the years, a way to facilitate or support more female entrepreneurship? Or something to the female founders themselves, female or women who would like to start their company?
Well, it's this thing like, do you want to call out the elephant in the room or not? And does it help that you address it differently or not? So this has been my 2020 topic. I always do a Sandborn 2020 topic. And my topic was, how can we address this lack of women? There is a systematic problem. We have 2% of the VC capital going towards women, and men and women likewise agree. And so I'm working on a research endeavor with the Hochschule Luzern where we're looking at this. So what research is showing is following. There's mostly men and women. We're fairly similar. When it comes to entrepreneurship, and for the ladies listening, there's a few things that are more pronounced in women in tendencies. And that's this aspect of overthinking stuff, not having enough self-confidence, and not pushing, okay? Matched with perfectionism on the other side. So not being able to push through on an imperfect model. And the good news is that you can train your brain. So for anybody of you, men or women, that think, oh, this is me, you can actually work on these skills, that you can train yourself to be more working out of your comfort zone. There's very easy tricks to do this in daily routines, like that you get up and each day, for example, talk to a person in the supermarket, right? You just have to set your space, and maybe something very random, but okay, you're getting out of your comfort zone. It's building the self-confidence level a bit. And then the other thing is that you want to not overthink things, and you don't want to talk yourself down. Like you say, oh, I'm ugly, or I'm not good enough for this. This is that you have to really focus on building like positive. You have to put these negative thoughts down again, and you can focus on like training that. I can give you more hands-on methods. I know a lot of people talk about how do you say this putting 3 things down in the morning that you're grateful for. This is not enough, okay? It's good, but you guys have to really work on just moving forward. For those of you that it doesn't come naturally, and this is more proclaimed with women. When it comes to seeking out investment capital and negotiation skill trainings, I think negotiation is an art. Everybody, men and women, we have to learn it. It's not easy. I'm not myself that good at it by nature, but I've been learning it a bit over the year. And in negotiations, give yourself the space to give your opinion. So women say like 75% less in business meetings, and that is also startling, right? So again, in a business meeting, always make sure you just say something, even if you think that I don't want to say anything. You just get used to just saying something, and then over time, building your argument a bit more. And then the other thing is that women more likely are going to, when they build an argument, they put it into a question mode. So they're like going to be, well, I think there's not enough women in startups, right, David? So then I like put it into the question, and then you diminish the argument a bit. In VC, venture capital settings, the key learning is that venture capitalists or people giving investment capital have to stick to their due diligence and just be as bias-free as possible. They can ask tough questions. That is totally normal. Women get asked more defense questions. So, for example, how are you not going to lose my money? Well, maybe a guy gets more likely asked, how are you going to win me more money? And if for anybody of you who have been in investor meetings, it's really important to keep like a narrative and a storyline positive, especially for your first rounds. So there you can just train, obviously, these meetings a bit, you know, talk your pitch in front of the mirror, be prepared, all these obvious things that anybody should do. And then also when you see that that you get asked negative questions, try to pull it back into the positive sense, and just mind game these answers a bit ahead of time. And if you're aware of these, I call them, these are very classical biasing problems that you can occur in the context of entrepreneurship. If you're aware of them, it at least helps me to know when it happens that I can rescue the situation.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's very insightful. You could probably go on another hour with more insight like that.
Well, it's fine. This is my 2020 topic, so I'm down the rabbit hole with this at the moment. I'm really deep into it.
But I wanted to touch on the topic of failure, and you know, with your background in the U.S. and also you know your work here in Switzerland, obviously there's a big cultural difference. And then, of course, there's a difference between failure in the corporate and failure in the business world and startups and all of that. What has been your experience around that so far?
I think failure, it's a thing that we always say, but I'm going to do practical examples. So I have, you know, let's go back to this. This example has been a very painful one for me. This blockchain science publishing startup is because we fell out in the founder team and we really burned bridges with important people in Zurich or not in Zurich, just with people. I don't like to burn bridges. I like to say, okay, we failed, but I didn't mess up the contact. So I think this realization that this happens and to what magnitude it can happen. If somebody could have warned me before, I would have been thankful, because I think, you know, I've been in litigations, I've been through problems that I thought would never arrive, and I've burned relationship businesses that I never thought would happen. So I think there's two things that I've learned, and the one thing is just, once it happens, it's going to be hard, and failures in any way, you don't try to engineer towards it, but you kind of also don't have to accept the learnings. So I had like, another example is that we kind of now liquidated a company that I worked with, and the investor told me, oh, so that's what you do, Isabelle. That's a big failure for you, and that's just your failure culture. That's why that happened. And that was such a hurtful thing for me to get, because I put a lot of my effort into it and it didn't work out. And just to put it off that this was because it's a failure culture and it's okay to fail, it's hard. I'm just trying to give you these real life examples because it happens. You're going to sometimes have to liquidate companies. Maybe you're going to even, you know, really mess up business relationships, and people are going to also really tell you hurtful things. And despite your good effort, it will not have worked out. Okay. And I think what always helps me is to talk to other people who have experienced it. And it's kind of like you realize, I'm not the only one. So I'm not the only one that has really burnt business bridges, or I'm not the only one that was blamed. Yeah, as a manager, you're always going to be the one that has to take the blame as well. So how do you deal with that blame? Nobody said thank you. It's a failure. You blew their people's money. They're not going to want to work with you again. And how do you stand up after this? And I think it's really about getting up the next days and kind of taking your time, however much time you need, and rebuilding yourself, and then also trying to rebuild the relationships, and in a way where say, hey, I'm sorry that it went that way, and let's grab a coffee. And that's how I do it. I really try to also not sever the bridges and kind of talk to the people that were in the conflicts and in the failures to understand and how they are feeling, and then you move on, right? You have to continue. And this is the thing. Once the failure happens, it's kind of like breaking up with somebody. You feel like you're never going to recover from that heartache, but the good news is you will. It will get better. depending on what the screw up is, it will take a while, but it will get better. And I think especially in Switzerland, there's not a lot of people that, again, are running businesses. So there's not that many people that you can talk to, and it's not discussed as openly. Like in America, there's much more of an open culture that you can do it with. I'm kind of sorry if it's getting loud outside. You have to let me know.
It's okay so far.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's different in Switzerland, but if you're surrounded by the people that can share these experiences, just get on the phone with them and share that, and have other people to talk to about it. That's really what has helped me through it. And acceptance in the business world, I think maybe it's about something about getting older. You care a bit less. So I will still go out there and do it again. And, if people don't like me, they don't like me. If the people that like me, they will like me. If the people care to make an opinion about the situation, they will ask, right? So I think, and especially the startup community is aware that it's high risk, and it's aware that this likelihood of it not working out is there. So people that have this business experience in the sector should know what they're getting themselves into. Yeah. Not all of them do, but most of them should. So you also can live a bit with that in the background.
Thank you. I mean, it's nice to hear firsthand and from a personal perspective. It's easy to talk about other people's situations. It's not always easy to talk about our own. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I wanted to ask you about hiring people. Have you had to hire people in your company? Have you had to fire people? What has been your experience when it comes to managing a team and building culture?
Yeah, well, it's kind of, I have had an interesting journey on this one. I'm also going to share it because it could be interesting for a few of you. So last summer, I had 11 employees. So we were pushing a bigger group of people. There were a lot of interns and also temp workers. So I always try to keep my pay table pretty lean. It's also tough in Switzerland to get talent at low price. So I was pushing basically around 11 people team in front of me. How I found them and how I guided them, I normally reached out over the networks that I knew. So for interns, I would go to the respective universities. I've had great engineers from UZH. We've had great engineers from ETH. They're universities that are based in Zurich, and go to their student websites or on Facebook. Or even ETH is an entrepreneurs club with speed dating. So I've found great Entrepreneurial talent right here in Zurich. For the business talent, I normally like to go for business development jobs to my alma mater, to St. Gallen. And now here comes the interesting thing. But then I've had great experience also with design students from HSLU, from Hochschule Luzern. And then there's also people like Alessandra, who was from Munich, recommended to me because a friend of mine had to let her go because his startup couldn't keep her hired anymore, and I was looking for a working student. So I've had a lot of these kind of hires running my business and setting it up. My key learning was always that I first went for people that were similar to me, and I think a lot of managers do this mistake, but I did this mistake already back at Startup.ch when I was setting up this team. My first hire was a great guy, but we were just doing exactly the same mistakes, so we weren't very complementary. So what I always recommend is what you do there is that you have to make a profile and be kind of clear of who you're looking for and where your weak spots are. Maybe run, this Myers-Briggs test, the 16personalities.com. I have people do this, and I also say, look, this is me, because I then can see from a personality and work level, would it even match? And then really look at the skill set and be very specific of what you're looking for. Because normally in a startup, you're just going to be overwhelmed, right? It's too much of everything. I'm doing everything. So I just had a friend of mine, she just hired a marketing manager for her studios, and she didn't really know how the marketing should be run. And this happens to all of us. And then this, lovely 24-year-old comes, and she's like, I don't know, there's no impact. I'm paying her a lot, but there's no impact. I'm not seeing any growth. And then this is the same mistake that I've done. So you really have to break down and understand what the person's supposed to be doing. Because if you as a manager don't understand it, your team will not understand it. And if you get in expert, so I like to do this expert hybrid model that I ask people to advise me and more junior people on how it's done. For example, a friend of mine, she's a genius at community building. So I asked her, can you come in for a few sessions per month to coach this more junior person with your expertise so that you can build up a junior person that is hungry for knowledge up to an actual internal person that you can then work with on the long run. And this has been a model that has proven for me well, because I think the classic hiring mistake a lot of us have done is that we get inexperienced people, expect them to do everything, especially when they come from a corporate, golden age job in Switzerland, and they're not going to get shit done and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. But depending on your growth status, you kind of have, I call it in the early stages, you need the chaos masters. So people that can create something out of chaos, right? And you can check for these personalities, but the later you go in your startup, and depending if you're hiring on leadership level or junior level, you have to look for exactly who you need and why you need this person. The best people I have gotten have had experience exactly in startups and in that industry that you need. Like if you need somebody for scale up, try to look for that person who has built a business in that space. This is the most likely person to meet up. And these people you have to look for over networking. You have to see, okay, who had experience in this area and who can I network with? But now back to my experience last summer, I realized that it's not for me. I'm pushing a bigger and bigger employee table, and I'm realizing that what I'm enjoying is that per startup, I like to have the employees, but I don't need in Sandborn, I don't want to go into the office every morning and tell people what to do. I don't want to have the responsibility that I have to push as much turnover so that I can pay all the salaries. So I was pushing a business model that for me wasn't the right fit. So that was a really big insight for me that I thought would never happen, because when I started this endeavor soon 4 years ago, I thought I'm going to build this massive company builder, right? Ethically correct and nice, kind of like Rocket, but big. And what I realized for me last summer was like, I don't want to go down this route. This is not going to be for me. I enjoy my freedom. I enjoy being able to work from where I want, and I enjoy, I think, being small. And this is now giving me a lot of kickback, because the first question I get asked is, how many employees do you have, Isabelle, right? And I say, oh, I don't have anybody anymore. And they're like, oh.
What did you do wrong? Why are you downscaling?
Why are you downscaling? But I realize that there's a whole tribe of people who have enjoyed downscaling, so to speak. And also it's a different way of running a business. So I think one has to, especially when we talk about startups, I was also the one that wanted to be the next Facebook, but once you have to figure out what is this personal fit. So coming back to employees, we have teams working on the ventures, and I am still leading and helping hiring teams, but at Sandborn, it's just me, right? And once in a while, I will get in interns, and once in a while, working students just to help me do some business development on these newer projects like the women's projects. So this is what the setup is so far. So for hiring, really, and the hardest thing is also when you did wrong decisions with hiring, is to let the people go again, right? Because I've had people that have turned culture toxic and we couldn't take care of it and you had to let people go. So really taking a lot of time for right hiring while you're trying to grow is important.
And I guess there's no easy way to fire someone.
No. I think for me, like also firing is not an easy thing to do anyhow. I think you don't really want to fire people. I think I've never been in this situation where I think it was what you wanted to do. You always try to make it work and get people like organized, and you want to keep them on board as long as you can, or redefine something. I think having to fire somebody is also like showing like poor leadership from a leadership perspective again, because it most likely was the wrong decision or you were not leading in the correct way.
So on a similar vein, question from the audience, both in hiring and firing, when you are looking for a co-founder, A, finding the right co-founder, and B, what if it doesn't work out, and breaking up that co-founder relationship?
Well, so this is another interesting one, and I can just share my experience of being, again, a one-woman show. I think solo founders get a lot of stigma that it's not okay to be solo, but the reality and the percentage showing that you're going to be solo is very high, okay? So first of all, I want to kind of encourage you guys who are solo founders to push through by yourselves, and also realize that it's sometimes a bit easier in the decision-making process to be one person. Obviously, you're going to lack certain competences and you're going to have to figure out on how you're going to deliver on it. So first of all, being solo is not bad, but there's a stigma in the startup industry that it is, and you have to argue a lot against it, especially when it comes to investors. But then again, the question is, when you talk to investors is much later on. It's not in the initial idea phase. Being solo, and I'm just going to say one more comment on this one because I think it sometimes is not touched upon enough. What I do encourage is that you build yourself this kind of like, I don't want to call it mastermind, but build yourself a peer group of people that can help you with where you're not good at and who you can talk to regularly so you don't go crazy. Especially in times of Corona, you will need this regular exchange. So do like a buddy system like you would for languages with other entrepreneurs. Okay, this is, I think, proven myself very helpful, and it keeps me on track. Because if your problem is accountability, buddy up with somebody else and be accountable for that. You kind of move forward. But if we go exactly into the question, how do you find another co-founder? It's the hardest thing to do, and it's can be strategically necessary for you to do. What I would again think about is, who do you need? What profile are you actually looking for? And what who is this person? Technically, you always have this kind of non-tech combo that you need, right? And then I would pay attention and look for these person where you can find them. Like, for example, like I said, at the university, students, or if you want more experienced hires, there's a lot of people that want also to join startups from an experience level that you can meet, I think, through places like Startup Grind, okay? But for me, what happened, and maybe I can just share again this experience, I thought to start Sandborn, what was another name, with 2 other people. And the 2 other people, I still admire them very much. They're entrepreneurs and still successful entrepreneurs with their businesses. They would not move out of their companies full-time to join. So they would have kind of been more advising, and I would have been the executing power. And what I realized for myself, that I wanted somebody that could be totally there at equal and with equal benefits. And it ended up not working out, which was for me really half a year, I think, or 3/4 of a year process. So we were really discussing working together towards it, and it didn't work out. And from that point on, there has been several touch points where I have collaborated with other people. But normally, the further you push with the business, it's not the co-founding technique anymore for me. It's that I will collaborate on people on project basis where I see the project fit. And it's been okay. Now, for co-founders, what you can do is really, you have to vibe with these people and find them wherever, and it has to be a time fit. That's what you maybe can take away from my learning of not having them. I have another friend who started now another community building app at scale, and she had to look for a technical co-founder and got introductions through her advisors. So they were just starting to help getting intros, talk to this person, talk to that person. okay, until she found a technical co-founder that is still hired by another company but will move out and has now helped on the prototype. But it took her also about a half year to find this person. But it was over network, it was over reaching out and telling people, look, I'm looking for a technical co-founder. This is the profile. This is the app that I want to develop. Who do you know? Who can I talk to? And then you kind of work yourself through. And a lot of people weren't the right fit either in her case, because a lot of people didn't have the right experience and don't compromise for not having the right fit, because or you're better off by yourself. But I also think that people worry that they cannot run their startup because they're by yourself. It's better to push your idea as you go while looking for the co-founder as you go, because this co-founder may
instead
never
of settling
come.
for something lesser.
Yeah, I would just pursue building your business idea at your best you can, while also looking for a co-founder. I would always say, because it's so hard to find the right match. There's also people that do it the other way around. They have somebody, they don't care what the idea is, but they want to work with that person. That also works, right? And then you really brainstorm with that person and get aligned, right? Make sure that you are on the same page with very important topics like, worth ethics, company setup. And I especially think that co-founders who have higher success rates normally have been through thick and thin together. So they know something about each other. They maybe have even worked together before. And also know when to break it off, and also build a culture where you can talk directly with each other, right? Where you don't cover these things up, because if you have problems in your team are going to be the biggest challenge to take care of. I'm really sharing personal experience because I think everybody will have their own way on figuring this co-founder topic out.
Probably, something else I've heard often, and that's quite important, is to make sure you have your agreements written down. Because even if you're friends, even if you want to do a handshake agreement, you never know what's going to happen in the future further down the line. It's so much easier to make agreements when there's no money involved. If all of a sudden you get some financial success with an investor, and there's all of a sudden a bunch of money on the table, it's possible that perspectives will change on equity and responsibilities and things like that. So it's always important early on to have these agreements in writing.
I totally agree to that. I think one doesn't, out of politeness, we don't talk about the hard things early on. But for example, for me, who I've now started projects up early, it's one of the first 2 or 3 things we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about, so how much can you work on this project? What is your expectations towards the equity split or the profit split? And we get this clarified very early. And we also agree on milestones. Like, how long are you going to hang in there? Like, where do we want to be? Because what people do is they will have these ever ongoing discussions, and then it will fizzle out. But this is easy to do with people who have built companies before. People who have not built companies before, be patient with yourself. Take step by step. Okay, this is also the other thing. It's always good to have the agreements ready, but sometimes you're not even sure if it's the right person. Right? Because what I do on my projects is I even call corporations. I will say, hey, I think that's the right company to partner with on this idea, because they can execute it. I can't. And I will get on a telephone call, and it will be very businessy the way we will handle this. But I also know from co-founder discussions, this can be highly emotional, right? And then something can pop up. The person can move out of country. And so you just have to also talk about these, so to speak, exit cases. You can always differentiate between a good and bad lever. And then just talk about it. So, okay, let's say you can't work anymore because you're moving outside the country. What are we going to do with that then? And then you put it down in writing. I think this is a good thing to do, David, at the beginning.
We're coming towards the end of our discussion session, our fireside chat session. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions before we have Well, I was wondering if there's, Isabelle, if you have any experience or conversations around the topic of exit. When a lot of people go into startups thinking this is their baby for life, they're going to grow it, and others have this it's not necessarily a bad thing, but a short, maybe further attention span, where they want to build something, grow it, and try something else further down. And so they have this conscious idea that they're going to do it for a couple of years, try to exit it, and move on to something else.
Well, my experience for exit, so none of all my companies that I'm working on, they're built for profit. Okay, so the exit experience that I have, and that's why I'm also going to be very candid about it, is that I was pulled on to a due diligence. So we did, it was an American startup where we had to help them organize the book running, as you call it. That's normally what the investment banks do at that point. But this is, to get a startup to that point that you're able to have these discussions. Okay, so in that startup, I was pulled in just for expert knowledge, right? But really grown out of my own startup to exit, no, I don't have that experience. But seeing what happens during bringing IPOing a company and how that is done, I have a basic understanding from this one experience with a US-based startup. But the thing is, to bring it to that size and that possibilities is for IPOing it, this is going to take you a while, but if you have to think about scalability from the beginning. So what I think is the question that you asked is the correct one. I see people not asking themselves this question at the beginning. It could be for profit or it could be for scale. But you really have to understand at the beginning that these are two very different growth routes and two different models. They can conjunct. And especially what investors would want to see in a startup is not necessarily what you've maybe engineered your business for. So this alignment you will have to do. You don't have to do it in the idea testing phase, but when you come to fiddling out the business model in more detail, you're definitely going to have to cross that bridge. Because I see startups that are just simply not scalable, right? And that records, and they will not deliver on that growth, right? It's just going to be a sheer impossibility. So it's kind of like, for me, frustrating and hard to see them even go and pitch for investor capital, because I'm like, this will be very hard to do. I can give you an example. We had an interior design startup that was basically running everything, the interior design from A to Z, and it was based off of a American and Berlin-based one. And this one is a very tricky one to scale because it's so operations heavy and you have a lot of capital locked down, right? Today, I see these business models more clearly and understand more what the investors' doubt would be that they can deliver, right? Yeah. So this being said, is just for IPO, to bring it to IPO or a trade sale, it's a journey that you can do, and remember to really be careful in how you engineer your business model towards it, because it just some simple discussions with experienced investors will help actually. If I could do things differently, I would consider this more earlier on, and then earlier on say, okay, it's for profit or it's actually going to be potential for exit.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Isabelle, for all of that. I mean, there's a lot of interesting insights and great to hear, especially from your personal experience. You know, that's really wonderful. And that's why we like to invite people like you here to be able to share the personal things that happened, and makes a difference in each one in their own journey.
Thank you guys for having me.
I'd like to wrap up with a few more questions, but these are what we call rapid fire questions. So it's a little bit different in the sense that it's meant to be, quick, short answers. First thing that comes to mind, there's no right or wrong answer, and see if we can bang through these quickly. So,
okay, let's do.
What's one item that you own that you would never sell? Oh,
that's a tricky one. I have to be quick. I I think I would never sell books.
That's fine. That's good. And what's your most unusual skill?
I think, unusual skill. I'm wondering, what is it? I would have to ask my friends. You can maybe hear them. I'm sorry, I'm on vacation with a group here. I think what they always say, what's really funny is I have a funny way to dance. I can like do a funny twirl.
And what's more important, strength, speed, or stamina?
Stamina, for sure. I mean, I'm a turtle. My logo's a turtle. I'm like, fuck speed, go for a stamina. No, I think that's a bit of an antidote.
And which historical figure do you admire?
Cleopatra.
Very cool. What's your favorite season of the year?
I would say it's summer and winter. I like both. Yeah.
And when was the last time that you tried something new?
Actually, yesterday I went rock climbing I had to like hook myself in. I normally just went differently. I never had to be in the lead for rock climbing. That was the first.
Team or single founder?
Single
Cats
founder.
or dogs? Beer
Cats.
or wine?
Beer and wine. I guess beer, but I go for beer first at the moment.
And the favorite app on your phone?
Oh, what's that?
And what's something on your bucket list?
To go to South Africa. I haven't been.
And if you could have the attribute of an animal, what would you choose?
I would like to run like a cheetah, just fast. I actually like running when I watch cheetahs or something. Really
Nice. Thank you so much, Isabelle, for being with us tonight and for all that you shared with us. And really appreciate it.